Welcome to episode 1 of the Matcham Experience. Welcome. This is the first episode, so you've probably never seen me before, and you may never see me again. Just to give you context what this is about. So first and foremost, this podcast is not at all about me being an expert at anything, me giving advice on anything, me telling you, here's the right thing to do. I can give my opinion on what I think the right thing to do is, but I do want to hedge everything with that I very much feel that I'm still in the middle of my journey. I mean, all humans are really in the middle of their own journeys, to be fair. But I really do feel that I'm not quite an expert on anything yet. Maybe there's a few things that I would feel that I do have expertise to give on. One example would be if you ever play Halo Wars 2. Yes, I do feel as if I'm an expert on that, top 1% of the world. Probably, considering most people have, maybe 99% of people haven't even played it. So that makes it really easy. But what I'm here to talk about is not video games. What I'm here to talk about is just my experience going through life. This channel and all the content I make is really just going to be about the experience of somebody starting from the bottom, although I don't really think I'm starting from the bottom per se, but starting from whatever level you start at, and over time it will be nice to follow that journey, at least for myself. At least in 10 years, if I survive and we all survive, we could come take a look back at memory lane and be like, wow, this is how I used to talk, this is what I was thinking at that time, and if I had kids at that point, it might be cool for them to see it as well. So the purpose of this podcast, again, is just me to share my experience. I'm going to write a few thoughts down every week, maybe something like 3 to 7 thoughts per week, and just sit in front of the camera and speak about it and maybe make some content about it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Actually, one last note I do want to make. I think there's a delicate balance here where it's like part of me doesn't want to be coming off like I'm an expert and you got to listen to me on this thing or that thing. But part of me also doesn't want to downplay my own experience. I am 26 years old, which is very young, but also it's not as if I'm 6 years old, all right? And even a 6-year-old, I would argue, probably has some stuff that they could teach you about that you might not know about. I mean, everybody has their own experience, so there's two elements of that. I just want to come into this saying that while I will give my opinion, I don't see myself as a foremost expert probably on most of the most important topics, which is what I'm trying to develop. And then I encourage you, if you watch this and, I think I'm rambling. The retention's probably pretty bad on this type of chat right now. But if you watch this and you disagree, I would love to hear your comments. So let's get into it. I wrote down a few thoughts here of what I want to share on my first episode, and it's probably going to be the easiest episode for me to draw upon a couple really interesting things for me to talk about. And so let's do it. So the first one I do want to talk about is a very personal experience. Probably the most profound experience I've gone through in my whole life, which is probably why it's coming up on episode number 1. And I expect I probably will bring it up multiple times as I film more episodes. But the experience is about my father. My father passed away, and I want to talk about that a little bit and just share a little bit of the wisdom that came out of it, because it was a very expensive lesson. And if I can impart a little bit of wisdom on this, I think that would be nice. So this happened some months ago. It's not super fresh, but it's not super diluted. I don't know, super old either. It's less than a year ago. And I do want to talk a little bit about it. And the biggest lesson that I think I got from it is basically perspective. I will say that most of the lessons I got from going through this experience of losing a very close family member, I mean my father, right? I'm an only child, so it's really only, out of my immediate family, I only have my mother, my father, myself. The experience of this was, I would say, the most transformative experience. Well, let's call it tier 1 transformative experiences. I probably had a couple other ones that are in the same tier that maybe I'll talk about on later episodes. And the lessons that I've learned from this, I will also just want to mention, it's nothing that you probably haven't heard before. And I think that's really interesting. So just to rattle them off, what's on the top of my mind when it comes to, losing my father, going through that hard and terrible experience, what was really the lessons? Perspective, what really matters in life, how hard is all the real struggles of your life really? We've probably heard that most things that you worry about don't matter. And I would agree with that, especially after going through this. That's something I definitely can see a lot more clearly now. Another one is how important family is. I mean, once it's gone, and there's a finitude of death that is really hard to deal with. The only other death that I've ever had to really experience, like I've had grandparents die, and I've known of other people that have died, but nobody that I'm really close with. The closest one was probably a pet when I was a very young child that was unexpectedly dead. Died randomly. And that was really hard as a kid, but obviously the connection you have with a cat, for example, compared to a parent when you're much older is nowhere near the same. And the main lesson, again, is just perspective of what really matters in life. So I would want to share that, that maybe others can use this as another reminder. Probably try to imagine what it feels like to have, maybe your close one, whether it's a sibling or a parent or any kind of loved one, really leave. It kind of really cuts very deep, and it makes you realize, wow, just because you don't have the money you want, or you don't have even any minor injuries, your hand's hurting, your hand's broken, somebody doesn't do what you want you to do, or what you want them to do, somebody rejects you, your car is not working, everything doesn't really matter, man. Doesn't matter. And that's something that was, I don't like to say like things were good about my father dying. Obviously, I would pretty much give everything to just have this not happen, but if I am looking for silver lining, and I think I'm blessed to be somebody who can easily, or more easily, look for silver linings in things. One of them is being, wow, now I can just put everything into perspective after going through an emotional experience like this. Another thing I would just comment on this experience is when it comes to learning lessons, I do think there's a certain truth or it's interesting how there's an emotional learning that comes with a knowledge-based learning. So me telling you, or myself, or whoever's listening, perspective is important. I'm sure you've heard that. I heard this many times, especially I follow Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. He talks about it all the time. But there's an emotional learning that comes from going through these experiences, which, again, I would put, not that this is a good thing to go through some pain like this, but there is a silver lining from going through it. There is some emotional learning that comes. I want to give another example of this. I quit sugar about 2.5 months ago, and I've always known that I should quit sugar, but I want to share why I actually ended up quitting 2.5 months ago, and it's because I had an emotional experience. Basically, I was binging on sugar, eating a whole bunch of Oreos one day, and I love sugar, I have a big sweet tooth. I didn't really think it was that big of a deal, to be honest, but then I just kind of realized, checked in with my body, and I was having the shakes. Like, I'm shaking, it's hard for me to think, I'm feeling icky, there's no better way for me to describe it than I was feeling icky. And it wasn't feeling normal. Well, it definitely wasn't feeling optimized. And it got me thinking, why am I feeling this way? And I just kind of realized, wow, me putting all the sugar in my body is totally messing up my body. And it really, it scared me straight, where I just started thinking, if I keep doing this, I'm almost certainly going to get diabetes. I go on ChatGPT, start doing research. Okay, these might be symptoms of pre-diabetes. And, it's kind of like a wake-up call. So I think there's a certain value through the lived experience of negative events that can provide these wake-up calls. So that's just one thing I would like to share, even with myself, whenever I go through a negative experience, to recognize that there is some positive that can come from it, being that it can give you that emotional learning. Be curious what other people think about that as well. I've heard Tai Lopez talk about this, saying that when you get older and you turn into an adult, basically adults don't change anymore. I've heard Elon Musk say he's glad people die. I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines that it's good that people die because old people don't change their mind, they just die off and the new generation, carries forward evolution, whatever. I feel like that can be very true. And then, but the caveat is, there is one thing that can allow you to change your mind, according to Tai, I've heard him say, which is immense pain. Immense pain and trauma can allow you to change. And again, going into the two experiences I just shared from my own life, my father passing away, my body having an extreme reaction to candy and making me think, wow, I might die, or I might, drastically shorten my life by maybe 10 years, get diabetes. I should really make a change. So let that be something I want to share. I think there is great value in the negative experiences. While we do want to avoid the negative experiences, it's good to know that there is a silver lining at least, and we can look for the lessons. When it comes to my father passing, is there anything else I'd like to share? I think the other thing mainly is the perspective of really what matters in life. So number one is perspective, all the things that don't matter. But then the other side of that is what does matter. And really what I came to realize is, and I've heard other people say this again, but it wasn't really till this emotional experience for me where it clicked. What does matter? Yes, you want to work hard. Yes, you have big goals. But for me, what I think matters at the end of the day is probably relationships with other people. I've heard a lot of people say, I heard Tai Lopez say, basically the point of life is socializing. I've heard Andrew Tate say, people were controversial about him, but one interesting thought I heard about him say is that basically all of life is just people going into rooms and speaking to other people. Politics, you're just in a room, you're yapping around with everybody else. Business. I mean, what am I doing right here? I'm just sitting in my room yapping onto a camera, which is like a technology version of a person. When you go out on a date, you go to eat something, you go to play mini golf. Yeah, you're doing something, but you're doing something with another person, and it's that shared experience is really valuable. And so, with my father passing, when somebody dies, obviously they can't come back. At least not in the modern world, I guess. I don't know. We can talk about that later, maybe. But generally, they can't come back, and so those relationships are really like kind of like the most valuable thing, and you can't buy them too. That's another thing. You can't buy relationships. At least you can't buy high quality relationships. You can buy relationships, but they don't have a certain kind of emotional depth that gives them meaning a lot of times. At least for myself, and not that I've really had that issue where I have so much money I'm buying all my relationships. No, that's not me. That's not where I'm at. That's not a problem that's been on my list. Not yet. But it is something that is on my mind. Just that relationships are important and perspective that what really matters. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to write about here, not that I wanted to write about, that I wanted to talk about in today's pod is the concept of investing in leverage. This is something that's really on my mind. So shifting gears here more into business. While I don't think business is the point of life, and even a lot of business is just about relationships, and like a lot more focus probably should be into making sure that you have connection with people that love. Love is one of the greatest sources of joy, and so if you don't do that, you're not going to get it. But I do focus a lot on business still. I think it's kind of foolish to think that money doesn't matter. I mean, if you don't think money matters, you can just go look at these guys living on the streets. I don't know. While money doesn't matter, I think lack of money might hurt a lot. And when it comes to making money, anyways, everybody's pretty much going to have to work. And so it really only makes sense to be at least as efficient as you can be while doing it. There's probably a lot of things you should think about in this, but the two on my mind is, number one, do things you like to do, right? There's a passion element. Don't do things you hate. If you hate math and you hate being super structured and organized, you probably don't want to be an accountant, right? There's just like an element of truth in that. But the other side of that is, if you are going to have to make money and there's things that you want to do that may cost money, and money is really life. If you don't have money, you can't get the best health treatment, you can't get the best food, you can't get a lot of things. So there is an element of you just really want to be aware of how to make money and being efficient at making money. And what's on my mind with this is investing in leverage. So I'll talk about investing first. I think investing is underrated. Investing is underrated. Investing in yourself in particular. And all the top gurus talk about this. And so what's on my mind with this is just trying to look for ways so that I can invest in myself this year. And I'd be curious if anybody has comments on some underrated things. But just one thing that's on my mind. I do want to try to invest in myself as much as possible. And what's probably that going to look like most is educational kind of courses. Obviously, you see I have some books behind me. Those are great investments of learning. Online courses. Today was Alex Hormozi's $100 million models book launch. I bought the book. Almost bought his live book, what would you call that? His live sale. He wanted to sell 200 books, donations. That came with a whole bunch of upsells of like great things that would be for business. Very close to buying it. The only reason I didn't pull trigger is just because when I talked with ChatGPT about what stage of business I'm in, it didn't recommend it for me. And well, there's a part of me that thinks maybe I should have. I also probably would want to just be logical about it and not get the emotional pull and pull the trigger. But anyways, investing, very important. Investing in yourself. What that looks like for me is probably a lot of learning. The other thing I think that is probably really important, and for the rest of the year here, we're in August, so I want to get as many of these as I can in by the end of 2025 to keep my tax obligation as low as possible, is networking and conferences. I think traveling in general is probably a good investment. So if you can invest and go to a conference, you can kind of get a double whammy there, which is you get to travel, get that travel experience, but then you get to the conference, you get that networking, and then you also get maybe some insider knowledge at the conference, because I'm assuming if you're going to a conference, it's probably going to be, a lot of people go to different conferences, but if I'm going to a conference, I'm going to look for one that is probably at the top of the field for whatever I'm studying, whether it's marketing, AI, whatever. And so you get a lot. There's 3 points of leverage for why you may want to do that. So that's also one thing on my mind and what I want to do for the rest of this year. Which brings me to the other point of this that I mentioned is the concept of investing. And just to speak on that one last second, when you invest in these things, or you invest in the SME 500, as Alex Hormozi says, you are the only asset that you'll carry for the rest of your life. So it's just something that's on my mind. I want to do more of it, and would love to hear how others do it as well. But the other point I wanted to mention is leverage. And I think leverage is also an underrated topic. I really, really like the idea of leverage. And when you think of it, what is leverage? It's good strategy. Because every single person only has 24 hours in the day. I mean, there's nobody who has more. Maybe the guys on the ISS, maybe they're moving a little bit faster. They might have an extra minute or two. Just from the concept of, I think it's like time relativity. I can't speak, but time relativity. But realistically, that is not applying to me and you. It's not really, not very high leverage either. And so when it comes to leverage, it's just a framework that I like to think through a lot, is like, how much are you getting out of what you put in? You can think of it in terms of money. You can think of it in terms of time. You can think of it in terms of a lot of things, but like really any input you put into something. And so going back to the example I just gave there, a conference has multiple levels of leverage. You have that networking effect. You have the knowledge effect from learning from the conference. You have the travel effect from going and traveling. So it's just something that is really cool. And it's one thing I try to do is just try to think what has more and more leverage and how I can spend my time. So right now I'm shooting this podcast, and it's probably not a very good one. I would say it's definitely not going to be my best one. But I do think there's a lot of leverage in shooting content. I was talking to ChatGPT about leverage, and there's 3 C's to leverage in modern business. It's capital, because you can spend money and then it can earn more money. And so you don't really have to do anything other than allocate the money, and now you have leverage. Things are just happening. The second one is coding, because you can code a software and millions of people can use it. I think a good example of that is some of the richest guys in the world. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, even Jeff Bezos. A lot of their business is just based on code, and millions of people can use it. A lot of leverage on that. And number 3, the third C of leverage, and I got this from Naval Ravikant, is content. Because you can make a piece of content, and even if only 10 people see this video, I mean, that's 10 times the leverage than it would be to maybe speak with 10 people. Now, I think that you can get into the semantics there, because if you're speaking with 10 people, you're going a lot deeper. But I think you get the point. And then let's say instead of 10 people watch it, 100 people, 1,000 people, 100,000, or 1 million people watch it, I think now we can start to really see the leverage in terms of creating content. So that's one reason why I'm doing this. Another example, focusing on health. I would argue focusing on health is very high leverage. And then when we get into, all the different areas of health, eating, sleeping, exercise, I mean, those 3 are also very high leverage. There's guys out there that focus on, they'll be doing like making sure that they get, I don't know, like they're going for focusing on like sitting in the exact right posture maybe, or like doing the exact right exercises. And don't get me wrong, I think obviously like having good posture and like maybe like doing the right exercises matter a lot. But there's a lot of leverage in just like getting it done, which is also one of the motivations why I'm just creating this podcast. It's not turning out the best, or it might be, I don't know, I don't want to speak down on it, but just doing the initial actions, there's a lot of leverage in that. And but the other point of that is also doing the right actions. So when it comes to investing, what are the highest leverage things that you can invest in? Probably investing in yourself. You could do the stock market, but you kind of know you're going to get maybe 5 to 10% return on that. That's the leverage you're getting, 5 to 10%. What's the percentage return you get for investing $1,000 into a course that goes back into yourself? It could be, if you earn back $1,000 in extra income, which really is not a lot, that's 100% return, which is just one thing to think about. And so I do want to impart that wisdom, not wisdom, a little bit of wisdom, but that knowledge framework I like to use, which is just focusing on leverage. What are the things that matter? What are the things that are going to make the biggest impact? It's a good frame to look at the world through. Okay, the next thing that I have on my mind for today, I have 2 more things. First is the 5-point plan of engineering systems from Elon Musk. I just wanted to talk about this because I really like it. I just really like it. No other reason than that, other than I want to share it. And so I'm going to talk about it. So when you're creating any kind of system, Elon Musk has a 5-point plan. Step number, and I'll just tell you the 5 steps, and then I'll tell you what I think is interesting about it, and what I need to think about it in terms of my life. Step 1, remove dumb requirements from your system. So, for example, at Tesla, they have like all kinds of vehicle requirements. Like you need to have, I don't know, like a certain thickness of metal on a certain piece of the car because it's like safe. Elon Musk would say, first of all, is that requirement even, is it worth the damn? Does it make sense? If it doesn't make sense, let's get rid of that requirement. So that's step one. Remove all dumb requirements, because to get the metal, for example, it needs to be an inch thick. That's a lot of work maybe. And so if we don't need to do that, we can get by with half an inch, or in his case, half an inch. That saves a lot of time. So step one, remove dumb requirements. Step two, delete parts of the process that are not needed to get to that requirement. Another interesting thing, just get rid of things. And then step three is simplify and optimize the process in order to get it done. Step four is speed up the process and speed up the cycles so that you can iterate. And then step five is iterate on the process. Let me just double check that here. I got GPT on the side here. Sorry, not iterate. Step five is automate the process. So step four is increase the cycle time so you can iterate quicker. And then step five is automate. What I think is really interesting about this is the first three steps is number one, remove dumb requirements. Number two, delete dumb processes, or delete parts of the processes that aren't required. And number three is simplify and optimize the process. The first three steps are about basically getting rid of things you don't need to do. And I think that's a really interesting framework to carry on in life as well, which is whenever you have a problem, like the easiest way to solve the problem is just like, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. Get it out of here. We're not ever going to deal with it. I like that. I like that a lot because as somebody, I feel like I'm a bit of a go type of person. You can start working on things and just get like halfway through and be like, oh my God, I didn't even need to do this. And that's a lot of wasted effort, very low leverage. I mean, you put in all that input and your output is basically zero. I just think that's really interesting. I'll give another example from this. So I'm selling a car. Right now I'm selling a car. And I needed to replace the steering shaft on it. I sprayed some oil on it a few weeks ago. I'm like, oh, it's really tight. I don't know. Maybe I gotta buy the part, replace it. So a couple weeks go by, and I'm finally getting around to replace it. I take the car out for a ride, and the oil actually made a big difference in terms of the what would you call it? The steering, I guess, the twisting of the steering. And so now I'm just thinking, screw it. We don't need to fix it. I'll be honest with the seller. I'll tell them, I sprayed oil here, and you might need to replace the steering shaft in the future. But I no longer think that it's going to make a huge difference in terms of the value if I replace it, because it feels about the same. I mean, yeah, it's a bit sticky. They're going to feel obviously a bit sticky. But it's not like this thing that's going to make or break it anymore. So delete that part of the process. Okay, we can just sell the car as is. I remove the risk of messing up the steering shaft by replacing it. I remove the cost of doing it. Probably about equals out, to be honest. Like the cost of doing it and the value added probably would have been about equal. But it just saves time, and your leverage. You're putting in less time to get the same amount of output. Is much better now. So yeah, just a story about that. And lastly, the thing I wanted to talk about, fourth, is my favorite uses of AI. I'm a huge fan of AI. I don't know if it's actually good for society, if I'm being honest. I think there's a good chance that AI actually might be a net negative for society. I think technology in general might be a net negative for society, but we live in the modern era, and I'm not going to fight it. And just to speak on that a little bit on why it might be, I'm not saying it is. I'm just going to say I don't know, but I think it might be. I don't see it as a pure positive. It's just because they claim the Amish, if you look it up, the Amish are supposedly the happiest society. They have the least amount of depression, most happiness, and they don't use electricity. So does technology really improve our lives? I think in some ways, yes, like medical kind of things, you can live longer. But we're also in the era of the most depression. So does technology really improve your life? I think it does, again, for longevity, but for happiness, I think it's debatable. Now, going back to AI, my favorite uses of AI that I do want to speak on, just share them, and I encourage you, if you use AI as well, comment down below what your favorite use is. But number one, I love speaking to ChatGPT before bed. Because when you're going to sleep, obviously you've probably heard, you don't want to look at screens before you go to bed. It causes you to, the blue light wakes you up. Well, you can just talk with ChatGPT, lay in your bed chatting, and I find it's pretty fun. It helps me solve a lot of problems. I'm a guy that naturally likes to overthink things. A bit of a yapper, as you can see through this podcast, so it lines up nicely with my life. So one of my favorite things, just talk about, what am I working on? What are the things that I like to think about? I might just yap about whatever as if it's just a person there. But more often than not, I'll probably talk about, what it is I'm doing with my life, what I'm working on, and just getting ChatGPT's opinion on what I should do. Just some outside experience there. I also love asking ChatGPT what my greatest mentors would say on the subject. So if I'm looking for advice on life fulfillment, all right, and I'm saying, here's what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm yapping, blah, blah, blah. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what's going on. Here's what I don't like. Here's what I like. Here's what I'm not sure about. And then I'll just say, what would the top psychologists, top philosophers in this domain speak about? And if I don't know who the top philosophers and psychologists are, I'll say, and by the way, I don't know who they are, so tell me, who do you think they would be based on who I am? Or I might say, tell me what Sigmund Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche, Will Durant, Tai Lopez, Gary Vaynerchuk would tell me based on my situation. And I think it does a pretty good job of saying, like, well, Tai Lopez would say you need to iterate and adapt, and you need to focus on more knowledge. And Socrates would say you need to have the life of eudaimonia, blah, blah, blah. And it kind of just goes on and on. But it gives you a lot of great perspective, but not just any perspective, the perspective of the greatest thinkers of all time. So it's just crazy technology. Love doing that. The other thing I would say that ChatGPT, I love doing with it, is it basically does all your computer work now. If you have anything that involves you working on the computer, I think there's generally two bottlenecks. Number one, you just don't want to do it. You know what to do. It's just like, oh, this is boring. I don't want to do it. Or number two, you don't know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, at this point, ChatGPT has estimated, they say 1,000 IQ. I don't know about all that, but I will say it's very, very smart. If you just give it the proper context and you say, here's what I'm working on, here's what I'm trying to solve, like, how do I do this? It will basically tell you how to do everything. So just another thing I like to do. I have a computer job. Maybe I'll talk about my job in another episode. But yeah, it's very, very helpful for that. And then any other things that I like. Oh, one last thought I will share with GPT. I do feel GPT and AI in general is honestly smarter and smart enough, smarter than me already. Like, it could do the computer work probably already. And the limitation is no longer like this language model or whatever is like not able to figure out the problems. If anything, it probably does it better than me. The limitation, I think, is that this AI doesn't have access to go on your computer and use your computer in the right way. Like, it can't go on Facebook, Instagram, whatever website, start typing around. So I do think that we're probably on the cusp of AI agents taking over, being very, very high leverage. So that's one thing that I am keeping my eye on, because if that's a big trend that comes in, that could be a big wealth transfer. Hopefully, I'm just one guy's opinion. Again, I'm not here to share wisdom. I'm just here to share my experience and what I'm thinking about. So that's all I had for today's episode. Hope you all liked it. Comment down below whatever you think, and peace.